To see everybody this morning. If you're visiting with us, we are honored by your presence here and hope that your experience this morning will be uplifting to you. The worship has been wonderful. Thankful for all those who have led in it and participated in it this morning. Our subject this morning is thankful for trials. Athletes very often thank God for their victories and honor Him when they win. But I don't think I've ever seen an athlete blame God for their losses. And I think it's kind of interesting. If God is in control of everything, wouldn't you give Him credit for the wins and the losses? While the other team is celebrating and thanking God for the win, should the losing team blame Him for the loss? You never hear that kind of thing, and I'm not suggesting that it should begin. What I'm saying is we might have a misunderstanding about God's role in the way events roll out in our lives today. It may be a better way, instead of thinking God is the direct cause of everything that happens, we might look at it this way, that God does cause a lot of things to happen, but not everything. And in the bad things in life, God can help us through them, help us endure them. This is in our text for this morning, Psalm 30, where you'll notice in two places at least, David cries out to God for help. He's not blaming Him for what happened to him, but he's saying, you can help me through it. Psalm 30, verse 2, O Lord my God, I cried to you for help. And then Psalm 30, verse 10, hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper. If we truly trust God and believe that He can carry us through everything in every conceivable way, we will thank Him in the good times and in the bad. We can't do that if we think He directly causes everything to happen. But if we see that He will help us through the tough things, then we can thank Him even in our trials, our failures, and difficulties. As we look at Psalm 30, we can't know for certain what the background is, but we know these are very difficult times for David. Just look through it quickly with me. Verse 1, he seems to be drowning in a well of kinds because he says that God has drawn him up. Same verb that you would use to talk about drawing water up out of a well. You've drawn me up. He was afflicted with an illness of some kind. Verse 2, he thanks God for healing him. Maybe that was a physical illness. Maybe it was a spiritual illness, an emotional illness. He had been near death. In verses 3 and 9, he talks about how he had been delivered from Sheol, that's the grave, that he had been restored to life, and God had saved him. He'd endured the anger of the Lord, verse 5. There was weeping, verse 5. It had been a long night, he says in verse 5, using the poetry of the Bible there to talk about night. Night makes things worse. If you're going through trials during the day, when it turns night and it's dark and you're isolated and alone, it gets even harder, doesn't it? Elie Wiesel, who survived the Holocaust, has a book called Night. And he speaks of his life as one long night. You understand what David means when he says, it had been night for me. What he means is it had been a difficult time of mourning and sorrow. Because of David's pride, verse 7 says God had hidden His face from him. And we know that that happens with sin. Isaiah 59, 1 and 2, God is still there, but He's hidden His face from the sinner. And then we read that there was mourning, verse 11, and he wore sackcloth, verse 11, the garments of those who mourn. Like I said, we can't know for certain the background of this psalm. Many commentators believe it's found in 2 Samuel chapter 24. There's a parallel account of that in 1 Chronicles 21, where David had sinned against the Lord by taking a census that wasn't according to God's will. After David had done that, God said, there's coming a punishment, and I'll let you choose your punishment. Kind of like when a parent tells a child to go cut his own switch. It's that kind of thing, except a lot more serious. I'm going to let you choose your punishment. And it's either going to be 3 years of famine, 3 months of defeat by enemies in battle, or 3 days of pestilence, disease. And David said, well, I'd much rather fall into the hands of a gracious God than the hands of my enemies. And so I choose the pestilence. And 70,000 Israelites died as a result. As the angel of the Lord comes toward Jerusalem, where the population density is much higher and more people would die, David offers a burnt offering at the home of Ornan. And there at that place where the offering was offered, the angel of death sheathed his sword. That could be the background of this psalm. You could understand why David would be very distraught through an experience like that. It could be something else. David had a lot of near-death experiences to choose from, a lot of sorrow in his life, a lot of pain. And it really doesn't matter. We can find help and support from this text, regardless of the background. And what's amazing is through all this pain and sorrow, this long night, we see that David came out of it thankful. Verse 4, sing praises to the Lord, O you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name. Verse 11, you have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness. He says in verse 12, O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. The psalm is bookended in thanks. This psalm, full of so much darkness and so much night, it ends with the bright sun of day and gratitude. How can we be thankful for trials? How can we have this kind of attitude? We see how it came to David, and I think we can find something to apply to our own lives. And what we see is that David was brought through 3 levels of maturation. And we're going to track him through those 3 levels of maturation so that we can learn how to look at our trials the way that he did and emerge from them grateful as he did. So here's the first lowest level of maturation, not maturity at all. It's the beginning point, pride. David had a problem with pride. And to understand this, you need to understand that human beings have a degree of glory. We don't normally talk about our own glory. We speak of glory in terms of God, but we have a degree of glory. Look at the text in verse 12, and David there speaks of his glory. Sometimes the word is translated a whole being. The English Standard Version translates the same word, whole being, in Psalm 16, verse 9. I praise you with my whole being, something like that. The New American Standard Bible has the translation soul here instead of glory. But the word is glory. It comes from a very interesting Hebrew term, kavod. Kavod was used in the marketplace to describe the weight of something. And that was very important, weights and measures in the marketplace. You would know the value of something, the amount of food that you're purchasing, grain, for example, by its weight on the scales. Some merchants were dishonest, and they had dishonest weights, or they'd put their thumb on the scales. But weight was synonymous with value because of the marketplace. And so this word evolved to come to describe the significance or the importance of something, or the value of something, or the glory of someone. And it's applied many times to God because he really matters. David uses the word in verse 12 to speak of his own glory because human beings have inherent value. All of us, without exception, have been made in the image of God. And all of us, without exception, have had the Son of Man come to earth to die for us. Now, not everybody trusts in him and follows him and obeys the gospel. Not everybody is saved. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying all of us are considered valuable enough to God for him to send his Son into the world to die for every man and woman. John 3:16 tells us that. So we have glory. We have kavod. We matter. We are important. But our glory is so much smaller in degree than God's glory There are degrees of glory, and ours is nothing in comparison to His. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, Paul talks about how we're transformed into the image of the Son from one degree of glory to the other. One degree to another. Now, God has glory without degree, infinite glory. Ours is no match for His. Now, knowing that, we come to David, and it's clear that he let his glory, the glory of a king, he let that glory go to his head. David was important. He was valuable. But he overestimated his value. Look at Psalm 30, verses 6 and 7. He says, looking back on his life, "As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. By your favor, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong." David says, looking back, I saw that I was strong, but I was a little too headstrong. Because God's response in the rest of that verse, Psalm 30, verse 7 is, "You hid your face. I was dismayed." David looks back and he sees how proud he was. I let my glory go to my head because you made me strong. I started getting it into my mind that I'd made myself strong, that my strength came from within. And as a result of my pride, you hid your face, and I was dismayed. And why did God respond that way? Why is God jealous with His glory? It's the term that God uses. In Exodus chapter 20, with the 10 Commandments, after the second commandment, you shall not make a graven image and bow down to it instead of me. He says, "For I am a jealous God." Now, why is God jealous with His glory? Does He not want His leaders to have authority? Does He not want someone like David to be appreciated? Well, here's the answer to that. God is jealous with His glory. Being righteous and true, He has to be truthful, and He has no rival. The reality is, there is no other God but He. And it's only right and true for Him to reveal that to us and not accept anything less. The book of Isaiah explains this better than any other book in the Bible. First of all, in Isaiah 43:7, we learn that we are created for the glory of God. The reason we are on earth is to show the world His glory, to ascribe the worth that is due His name. And not only that, Isaiah says in chapter 48, verse 11, "My glory will I share with no other." God will not share His glory because it's not right for Him to do so. It's not true. That is the reality of things, is that God has no rival, and it doesn't do us good to live out of sync with reality. If we do that, it's self-destructive. It's not good for us. We must live according to the glory of God. Pride creates all kinds of problems. I can make this whole lesson about the problem of pride. And we could talk about how pride is one of those root sins, and all of those sins really stem from getting our glory out of whack and misunderstanding that God is more important than we are, and not putting ourselves in the context of our own value. Yes, we're valuable, but we're nothing in comparison to God. I don't have time to go through example after example of this, but let me just bring up one for an example. One problem that we have because of pride, that we often don't associate with pride, is the problem of anxiety. Not all anxiety, but the kind of anxiety where you're trying to control things that are out of your control. I'm not talking about clinical issues or medical issues here, but this worry that we bring on ourselves, the sinful kind of worry. We should be concerned about some things, but we get overly concerned when we start forgetting our place and our role in society. Here's a couple of verses on that. 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 through 7. "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble." Why does He oppose the proud? Why is He jealous? Why won't He accept rivals? It's not good for us to deny reality. God has no rival. And so Peter goes on to explain, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. We often rip verse 7 out of context there, because this is a beautiful idea. I like the way the King James puts it, casting all your cares on Him because He cares for you. Casting all your anxieties on Him. I want to be unburdened by my anxiety. And so I want to throw that on God. God can handle it. I want to put all things in His control. But you can't do that without humility. You cannot relieve yourself of that until you drop your pride that says, I'm in control. This is going to go my way on my terms. As long as you're holding on to that, you're going to be in a constant state of anxiety and fear because you can't control everything. Life is going to show that to you sooner or later, right? And so Peter's saying, yes, you can cast your anxieties on Him, but before he says that, he says, God opposes the proud, and He gives grace to the humble. And at the proper time, if you give it over to Him, He will exalt it. Don't exalt yourself. Let Him lift you up. Now, over in Isaiah 51, Isaiah shows the pride of this kind of fear when he says, I am He who comforts you. Who are you that you are afraid of man who dies? Just who do you think you are to be afraid of another human being when God is on your side? If God is for us, who can be against us? And so this is the problem David was having. He had a degree of glory. Yes, he was king over Israel. However, he had let that glory go to his head. And so God hid His face, and David was dismayed. This brings us to the second level of maturation, discipline. God had prospered David, and David became proud. Again, go back to verse 6 and look at this language. As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. Prosperity. We Americans like prosperity. God has prospered us greatly. We are among the people on earth probably the most blessed. We love our prosperity. We love our things. We value ourselves according to our wealth. We look down, I'm sorry to say, some of us look down on people who are poor. We overestimate the value of people who are wealthy. We define ourselves according to our possessions. And we know we're not supposed to do that. We can recite all the Bible passages about wealth and how a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions, Luke 12, but we do that. We're proud of our prosperity, but prosperity is not why we are here. Listen to me. We're not here just to make money and have nice things. That's not why we're here. We're here for something greater than that. I want to share with you something from Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his book, The Gulag Archipelago. A gulag is a Russian prison camp, and Solzhenitsyn spent 20 years in a Russian prison camp and wrote a great deal about it after that experience. And among those many things that he wrote, here's one thing. He said, "Bless you, prison. Bless you for being in my life. For there, lying upon the rotten prison straw, I came to realize that the object of life is not prosperity as we are made to believe, but the maturity of the human soul." The object of life is not prosperity, but the maturation of the human soul. And so, David in his prosperity was lifting himself up. He let his glory go to his head, and God pulled back His protection and allowed him to be harmed. That doesn't necessarily mean God directly caused it. You look at verse 1, and David is saying, "Let not my foes rejoice over me." So clearly, David's enemies were creating a lot of this suffering. At the same time, if the pestilence of 2 Samuel 24 is the background of this, God was involved in it. Whatever the case, There are two ways that you can look at suffering. You can't avoid it. And so we respond in one of two ways. Number one, we can believe it's all meaningless and give in to despair. Or number two, we can try to learn something from it. You can either look at suffering and say, nothing makes sense. I don't deserve this. This is purposeless. Life is meaningless. You can go into nihilism, or you can look at your suffering, look at your trials, and try to learn something from it. I don't have to tell you that the biblical way is the latter. That we look at it as the discipline of the Lord. Now, I want to say a few things about the discipline of the Lord here as we try to make this point clear. I've got 4 things. Number 1, for the moment, the discipline of the Lord is painful. That is part of the definition of discipline. It hurts. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. We don't want it to come into our lives. We don't invite suffering. But without the suffering, we're tempted to lean on our own strength and on our own wisdom. Without the suffering, we don't take a look at our lives and say, what's going wrong here? Where can I turn? And so it's necessarily painful. Number 2, God may not be the direct cause of the pain, but He can use it for your benefit. It's very important that you see this. We tend to blame God for bad things that happen, sometimes with good intentions, sometimes with bad intentions. Those with bad intentions get angry with God. Why did you let this happen to me? Those with good intentions just say, this was God's will. I can't do anything about it. I don't understand it, but God must have wanted this to happen, and so it happened. I don't think it's either of those. I can show you from the Bible that the biblical writers did not look at suffering as something God directly causes, but as something that God can use for your benefit. That distinction is very important. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7, Paul is talking about his thorn in the flesh. We don't know what it was. It was some physical problem that he had that created him a lot of grief and interfered with his work and what he wanted to do with his life. And here's how he describes it in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. He calls it a thorn that was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being conceited. Paul was letting the glory go to his head, and so he received a thorn in the flesh. Now, where did it come from? He does not say it came from God. He says it was of Satan. And Satan's intention was to harass him. But God could use it as a messenger to keep him from being conceited. So do you see that? It was from Satan, used by God as a message to keep him from being conceited. Let me give you another example. I was over in Hebrews 12 a minute ago. I want to go back there again. Hebrews 12, verse 4, the writer is addressing the suffering of the people who were the original audience of Hebrews. And he says they're in a struggle, but the struggle is not attributed to God. He says their struggle is against sin. So the person fighting them is not God, but again, it's Satan and sin in general. It's your struggle against sin. But look what he says, verse 7. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. Maybe God could have prevented it, but that's different from saying that God caused it. You see where I'm going with this? He may not be the direct cause of your pain. The cause of it really isn't as important as what you're going to do with it, what you're going to let God do with it. God can use it for your good, to make you better. Number 3, it's very important to understand that the discipline of the Lord is temporary. Back in Psalm 30, verse 5, David says, His anger is but for a moment, but His favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. Hebrews 12 10 and 11, they disciplined us, our fathers, for a short time as it seemed best to them, but He disciplines us for our good, that we may share His holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. And then also 2 Corinthians 4, 17 and 18. Our light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, temporary, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Over and over again, we have to be reminded that our trials are painful, but they're temporary. You can look back and realize that, but if you're in the middle of it, that's really hard to understand. And sometimes nothing makes you angrier than somebody coming up to you and saying, "This too shall pass." You don't want to hear that when you're hurting. You don't want to hear that when you're unemployed. You don't want to hear that when you lose a loved one. You don't want to hear that when you're going through a divorce. You don't want to hear that when your children are rebelling against you. You don't want to hear that when you've just gotten a really bad medical test. You don't want to hear that when you're suffering. But you need to remember, whether you want to hear it or not, it'll pass. Number 4, it's educational. It's educational. There's something that you can learn from it. The word for discipline that's used in the New Testament, according to the lexicons, the Greek dictionaries, always has the inherent idea of training. Sometimes we look at, we'll say, spare the rod and spoil the child. And we quote a lot of those passages in Proverbs about the rod, and we think discipline is just about pain. It's correction that teaches, always in the Bible. It's never abuse. It's never lashing out in anger. It's always some kind of correction that trains, that teaches, that educates. That's the purpose of it. And so it's described this way in Hebrews 12, 10, and 11. It's given that we may share His holiness, and it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Discipline always yields fruit. The discipline of the Lord does. It may be steadfastness, James 1, 2, and 3. It may be endurance. It may be strength. It may be realizing that your strength lies in God and not yourself. And so discipline is important. Now, as we transition into the third and final point, let me share this. It's not automatic. The same two people can receive the same discipline with two different results. Discipline works according to the way the person being disciplined responds to it. And so in the final place, as we look through the 3 levels of maturity David passes through, pride and then discipline, we note in the third place his response of dependence. Now, look at this. We'll talk about 3 possible responses to the discipline of the Lord in the form of trials. Number 1, don't let your trials make you soft. That is, create in you a victim. Don't let them cause you to wallow in self-pity. Don't let them create a person who gives up, is always in despair, that sees himself in a permanent situation of mourning and loss. David says, weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. So that's the wrong response. David didn't respond that way. Number 2, don't let trials make you hard. Don't let them make you bitter. Don't let them turn you against God. Don't let them make you resentful. Also, David says in verse 11, you have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You've loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness. So Don't let them make you hard. Don't let them make you soft. What's the proper response to the discipline of the Lord? The proper response is dependence. The slide reads wrong. It's not discipline. The proper response to discipline is dependence. And we see this in David several times in Psalm 30. In verse 2, he says, "O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you healed me." The King of Israel bowed down and fell on his knees and cried to Lord for help. Verse 8, "To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy." And then verse 10, "Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper." Help! He's crying for help. What is that? That's dependence. The King of Israel is on his knees, and he needs help. Paul says the same thing. Going back to the thorn in the flesh, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, look at verses 9 and 10, or 8 through 10. "3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore," Paul says, "I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." What's he saying? I'm not trying to take this on myself. I recognize I am weak, and in my weakness and my dependence, I start relying on a strength beyond all other power. When I'm weak, I have the strength of Christ, and then I'm truly strong because He has omnipotent power. The proper way to respond is dependence. This young woman goes to her mother, and she pours her heart out to her mother. Nothing's going right. "I'm about ready to give up, Mom." And so her mother had her sit down in the kitchen, and she put 3 pots of water on the stove and set them to high heat. Brought them to a boil. And then one pot she put carrots, and another pot she put eggs, and another pot she put coffee. And she waited, sat with her daughter, and then after a few minutes passed, she turned the burners off and fished the carrots and the eggs and the coffee out. She had her daughter, that's one of her pews back there. She had her daughter touch the carrots. She said, "Feel the carrots. They're soft." Then she had her feel the eggs, peel the egg. And the inside of the egg was hard. And she had her taste the coffee, and it had a flavorful aroma to it. She said, "Some people, when they're subjected to the boiling water of hardship, come out soft. They wallow in self-pity. They become victims. They're unreliable. They're a burden to others. They can't help anyone else. Others are like the egg. You subject them to the boiling water of trials and hardship, and they become hard and bitter, impossible to move, respond to anybody. They're not helpful to anybody emotionally. They're angry. And then some people are like the coffee. They change the water. And like coffee in boiling water, when we're in the cauldron and the fires of trials, we can change the trials, or rather let God change the trials, from just senseless, meaningless suffering to the discipline of the Lord that makes us better. As Job said in Job 23, verse 10, "When I come out, I shall come out as gold." That's the proper way to respond. Not by letting it make you soft, not by letting it make you hard and bitter, but by depending on the Lord. It's the only way to do it. And when we learn dependence through the discipline of the Lord, we can be thankful for our trials. Nothing can defeat us when God is on our side. We can triumph even through our trials. We can even be thankful. And remember, if you're in the midst of your trial, this is not something you want to hear, but it's temporary. There will be an end to it, if not in this life, in the next, because there waits for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Paul says in Romans 8:18, I consider the suffering of this present time is not worth comparing to the glory that is to be revealed in us. It won't always be this way. So depend on Christ for strength. And at the proper time, He will lift you up. Maybe you need some help. Maybe you need prayer. You're not supposed to go through this alone. We're here. We'd love to pray with you. If you haven't come to God for help in the first place, and you need the gospel, you need the saving blood of Christ, come to Him today in faith and repent of your sins. Confess the name of Jesus. He's the Son of God, and be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. We're prepared and waiting and ready to help you. If there's anything that we can do for you, come now as we stand together and as we sing.